no water. Oh. Good morning. My name is Glenda, and I'm a very grateful, recovering alcoholic addict. And it's just wonderful to be here today. I'm honored to be asked to speak at this amazing event. I was here last year, and so to be able to come back as a speaker is just awesome for me. I really want to thank Hazelden for this day. I would like to thank everybody who is involved in putting this together. And I really want to thank Bill Fritz. He's not here right now. Bill is a good friend. And what I know about Bill is that when he's asked to do something, he steps right up to the plate. Bill is always in service. And service certainly has always been a big part of my recovery. There's a quote in the big book, and I never really do quote the book, but I will this morning. It's on page 25 of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It says, "We have seen much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into the fourth dimension of existence that we never dreamed possible." And for me, that is Alcoholics Anonymous. For me, that is recovery. I never, ever dreamed that it would be possible for me to care about myself. I never dreamed that it would be possible for me to care about anybody else. I never dreamed that it would be possible for me to understand the true essence of compassion. I never dreamed that it would be possible to be able to forgive or surrender. I'm from a really lousy neighborhood in New York. I grew up in the Bronx, so the word surrender is was pretty unfamiliar. And in fact, it was sort of like a term of weakness. So when I got here, I had a hell of a time surrendering. I didn't want to be beat. I really, really thought that I could control this. I had a very, very difficult time with surrender. I grew up as an only child. My father was an alcoholic, and my mother, as way back as I remember, was depressed. It was a very dysfunctional environment, and I have to say this from the beginning, and I do every time I chair a meeting. I am not blaming anybody. I'm not blaming my parents for the way we lived. You see, I used to do that. And what happened is, by blaming, that kept me a victim of my circumstances, the inability to grow up and to take responsibility. But when I worked the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, I got to see my part in that. And my part in that I was using that victim stance role as a way to not grow up, as a way to not be responsible. And I don't do that anymore. My poor parents were very, very sick. He was a drunk and she was depressed. She committed suicide, my mother. And they could only give what they could give. It was impossible for them to give any more. So essentially, I learned to grow up in this program. My extended family, we were the only Italians that lived in this rundown apartment building, very dark, dirty. You had rats, cockroaches. And in that building, most of the people were Jews. And they were Holocaust survivors. I remember seeing numbers tattooed on their arms. And they lived in fear, and I know, reasonably so. They kept their doors locked. They locked themselves away. We locked ourselves away because I know that alcoholism isolates families. So we lived just like our Jewish neighbors. And while all this dysfunction was going on, I had a little cot that was set up for me in the hallway where I slept. And it's funny, I thought that everybody lived like that. And to get away from all of that, I went to the movies every day, and The Wizard of Oz had been out for a little while, and so I used to go to the movies every day and watch Wizard of Oz. And I became Dorothy, and I know that I used to skip home singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. I'd be skipping down that yellow brick road, and I'd go home, back to the dysfunction. My extended Italian family, it was a scene out of, if anybody's ever seen The Sopranos on HBO, Sopranos / Godfather / Goodfellas. It was, my uncle was head of our family. The men had guns. There was corruption, loan sharking, a lot of illegal activities. And I used to look at this family and think, were these people dropped from the sky? These people are so weird. But again, I thought that everybody lived that way. And my grandmother used to make baked ziti every Sunday. Everything centered around food. So when I started watching The Sopranos on TV, it was just like the way I grew up. And the interesting thing about this is I got very good grades in school, so my family would talk about that. They would talk about my achievements. They weren't talking about the dysfunction that was going on in the family. They weren't talking about the drug addiction, the violence, the way we lived. They talked about me, and that's not uncommon. I became a distraction. And as long as that they could do that, it kept them from really looking at how dysfunctional this whole family was. It was expected that I go to nursing school. My uncle made the decision that I go to nursing school, and I did. I didn't dabble. I didn't drink or use when I was growing up at all because I didn't want to become like my father. I didn't want to become like these people that I had spent the first 18 years of my life with. I wanted to be different. I wanted to do something with my life. I wanted to be a good nurse. I wanted to help people. It was never my intention to hurt anybody. I wanted to go out there in the world and really make a difference. So at 18, I enrolled in Bellevue Hospital in New York, in Manhattan, New York University. Some of you, I see a lady shaking her head, you know that place. And in 1956, when I went in, or 57, I don't remember, it wasn't like the Bellevue now. It was different. It was exciting. There was a lot of drama. I used to work in the emergency room and everything, and it was great. And I got away from all of the dysfunction. But what happened is, I lived exactly the way I lived when my parents were raising me. We each had our own room, and I locked my door, and I isolated, and I didn't have any friends because I didn't know how to have friends. And I lived exactly the way I lived growing up, and I had a lot of fear, and that's the only way I knew how to live. And when they gave me the key to the medication cabinet as a student nurse, for a reason that I did not understand at that time, I remember giving somebody a shot of morphine and thinking, wow, he looks like he's, it looked like that felt good. And I could see the euphoria in his eyes, so I took a syringe and a vial of morphine, and I went in the bathroom and I shot dope. And once I started doing that, I was unable to stop. You see, because that felt good. That made everything okay. That I could do. That made sense to me at the time. And I justified it. Well, I got pain. I'm alone on a ward with 35 people. I only have a nurse's aide. Look at the way I grew up. I'm entitled and all of that. And I also said, yeah, but I'm not on the street prostituting myself. I don't have a dealer. You see, that came later. It's all, pharmaceutical. It's a pharmaceutical. And it's okay. And it got to a point where, and I'm not very proud of it. And and ladies and gentlemen, I've had to do a lot of work in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous around self-forgiveness, a whole ton of work. And what I used to do is I used to give my patients distilled water, and I would take their morphine. That's what I did. And how I graduated from that school, I don't know. I don't even remember taking my state boards. I don't even remember the last year in nursing school. I have no idea how I made it through. The last year, I do remember I got married. The last year I married a West Point cadet who had come to the school. I didn't like him. But I knew by then that I had a problem, and I thought, well, you know, if we got married, then we would leave and live a happy life, and I could leave all my problems behind. But you guys know as well as I do that wherever we go, we bring our problems with us, and that's exactly what I did. In the last year of nursing school, I got married, and he went off to do his war thing, and I stayed to finish up. And while I was there, the last year, I met somebody else, and I got pregnant. So when I returned to Bill, when I graduated, I didn't tell him that I was already pregnant. I was 2 months when I met up with him. And my daughter was born. We never talked about it. Her father was black. We never talked about it. He knew, obviously, but we never ever talked about it. We never talked about a lot of things. But I was an Army officer's wife, and he had graduated from West Point, so there was a lot of prestige there. And I wasn't allowed to drink the way I wanted to drink. And we lived in Abilene, Texas, and it was a dry county, and I couldn't buy alcohol, and I resented him because he wouldn't buy it for me. He said it wouldn't look good. And I used to go to these Army officers' teas at the general's house. I used to look like Jackie Kennedy with this little pillbox hat, carrying a big purse with my alcohol. I'd be drunk by the time I get there, and he'd find out about it. And you know what? It was just a nightmare. And I couldn't drink and use the way I wanted to, and it was even difficult for me to work. And I had two more children. I had 2 more children then, Bill's children, John and Carolyn. And when Kim was 4 years old, on her birthday, I got honest and told him the truth, which he already knew, and to get even, because he wouldn't buy me alcohol, and I couldn't use the way I wanted to. I got on a plane with Kim, and I left. And I left John and Carolyn with him in a blackout. And I kind of came to a little bit in Tennessee somewhere in this god-awful airport. And I remember this poor kid had to go to the bathroom. And I remember seeing colored women, and I saw white women, and I was devastated. See, that didn't make sense to me. I'm from New York. I'm from the Bronx, the melting pot. How can this be? I didn't know what to do with this poor child. And when we got to the airport in New York, I looked around for my other 2 children, and they weren't there. And I thought I'd left them on the plane. I thought I left them in Tennessee. I was so confused, I didn't know, so I called him. And he said, no, you made your choice. You decided that you wanted to leave with your daughter. Have a good life. I will raise John and Carolyn. And I said, no, you don't understand. I'm going to come back for them. I'm going to come back. It's going to be okay. You know, all the crazy stuff that we do. And he said, no, this is the way it's going to be. So I had to figure out what I was supposed to do about that, and I didn't know because I didn't have any money. I didn't have anywhere to go. I made my way back to my parents' house. And that didn't work out. That probably worked out for a little while. We used to fight a lot. And I slept on the subway with Kim. I found places to stay. I did what I had to do to support my child, and I don't want to elaborate. And it was dark life, hard trying to raise this kid. The good news is that today Kim has a year in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and she doesn't remember anything that happened. That's the good news. I finally found somebody else I could marry. I took him hostage, and we had 3 more children. I kept getting arrested. What happened was I had a job at Veterans Administration Hospital in the Bronx, and I was caught stealing a controlled substance from the medication cabinet, and I was arrested by the FBI, and that was the beginning of incarceration. I never could stay out of jail because I do a lot of stupid things when I get loaded. I do stupid stuff and I go home and I wait for the cops to come and arrest me. My children have seen me arrested. We decided to move upstate New York because things are going to be better upstate. Another geographic. Take our children and my alcoholism and drug addiction with me upstate New York. And the police knew me up there. I used to go into the drugstore upstate New York and forge prescriptions for controlled substances. And I kept getting arrested, and this last time when I went before the judge, he said to me, Jesus Christ, we keep putting you in jail, and you get out and you do all this stupid stuff. He says, jail doesn't seem to work for you. And I said, that's what I've been trying to tell you, duh. So they put me in a program upstate New York called Daytop Village. And it's a lot like Synanon. It's a lot like Delancey Street used to be. And it's attack therapy. They call it therapeutic learning community. The only thing I learned how to do in Daytop was to be angry. I had to wear a sign that said I was a stupid baby for the first few months on my back. They gave me men's clothing to wear to humiliate me. They told me I was bad. See, when I got to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I thought I was bad. I honestly believe that. I went into Daytop being very, very afraid, and I came out very angry of what had happened. Looking back now, again, I'm telling you guys, I have to take responsibility for everything that happened. Up to that point, everything that happened in my life got me a bed at Daytop Village. I have to take complete responsibility for that. When I got out of Daytop, I wasn't out more than a half an hour, and I was in Manhattan getting loaded. You see, because I didn't have a solution. I didn't have tools to stay sober. We never talked about God. There was no solution. All there was you're bad and you need to grow up. It was awful. So I was back doing the same thing I was doing, only because it's a progressive disease. I not only picked up, it was worse when I picked up. It was just, you know what? It was just a nightmare. So then what we decided to do was to take my family, take my husband and children, and move to California, to San Jose. And that's what we did. And my husband is not here today, or he'll be here later, and he's known as Grateful Dan in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he was my neighbor, and he lived right down the street. And we ran off together, and we tried to raise my children together. And a year after my divorce became final with my second husband, Dan and I got married. And my disease progressed. You see, I never forgot about John and Carol and my kids. I never forgot about them. And one day Dan said, why don't we go looking for your children? I don't know how to go looking for kids. I figured he was probably remarried by then. I didn't want to come back in their lives and ruin things for him. I figured that they were happy, that he was probably a colonel by then. He had a new wife. Why should I come in and make things worse for them? They didn't need a drunk addict for a mother. That was my thinking at the time. But we went looking for them because I don't know, I just needed to know that they were okay. And I remembered that their grandfather lived in Oregon, and we made contact with him. He told me where they were, and I made the necessary phone calls. And they were both in institutions in Maryland, separate institutions. They were both had mental health issues, and they were runaways and behavioral problems, and you name it, and they had it. But we got on the plane because I had to go meet my children. And we found John first at Chestnut Lodge in Maryland. They wrote that book, I Never Promised You a Rose Garden. That was from Chestnut Lodge. I didn't know what he looked like, but when I saw him, I knew who he was immediately. And he knew who I was. And we embraced, and I fell in love with him. He was just amazing, and he was 18 years old. And when I went to find Carolyn, it didn't go very well with Carolyn because she needed a mother and she didn't want me anymore. And that was very difficult. I used with my son in the psychiatric ward. I wanted him to like me. When he was 19, we got him out and he came to live with us in San Jose, and it was scary for me. I believe he was schizophrenic. It didn't work out, and I sent him away. After 3 months, I said to him, John, you got to leave. I said, this isn't working out. I was very, very afraid of him. And he packed up his things and he left and he went back to Virginia, where his father was. Father's still in the Army. And life went on, and my disease progressed because I kept beating myself up. I had an opportunity to meet this man, this is my son, and my daughter, and once again I screwed it up. And I had convinced myself by then that I was just a loser, and that I would die with a needle in my arm, or they'd find me somewhere, and what the hell, I just didn't care anymore, you know. And then at Christmas time, he called and asked to come home. He said he would be better. He said he would change and all that. And I said, it's not going to work out. I'm afraid of you. And a week later, on New Year's Day, I think it was, I got a phone call that a lady who was walking her dog in the snow found him dead. I got to tell you, it's been years, but I still... And, you know, he had had an overdose and he froze in the snow. And they wrote an article about it in the Washington Post, and they said that he had come to California to see his mama. They didn't give all the gruesome details. Thank God they left all that out. And that was it. And John was gone. And I blamed myself because when I got here, I really believed I killed my son. And the next 10 years was what I call my descent into hell. And I couldn't stop using, and the kids were getting bigger now, and they were going off on their own, and it started being just me and Dan in this big house, and I used to have mounds of cocaine and alcohol and heroin, whatever it was, you know. And I would stay in my bedroom isolated, blaming myself for killing him and not wanting to come out of my room. I'd look in the mirror. I hadn't looked in the mirror for years. I'd looked in the mirror, and I saw this woman who looked like she was starving. And I thought, well, you know, I couldn't die and I couldn't live. I was at that place that we talk about, that they bring up in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. They use that word dilemma, and what I think that word means is, if I take another drink, I'm going to die. But if I don't take another, if I take another drink, it'll kill me. But if I don't take another drink, I feel like I'm going to die. That's the dilemma, I think, that we're talking about in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was at that place where I couldn't get loaded and I can't stay sober and I'm just numb and I don't know what to do. And thank God, my husband, who had been using with me, had the wherewithal to get away from me. He said, we got to get you help. We have to get you help. And I said, well, wait a minute, you need help too. He says, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about you. You're going to die. See, he had this plan. His plan was to pick me up and put me in the car. We had this old Mercedes that I hadn't driven for a while because I knew I shouldn't be driving it, and start the motor and just go to sleep. And I thought, well, that would be okay. But that didn't happen. See, I think it was a divine intervention because Dan woke up one morning and made a decision to go to his employer at Safeway and say, my wife is dying at home. See, they knew something was wrong because he wouldn't show up for work or he'd leave work to go check on me. And he said, we have to get her help. He left the home. He came back and he said, my employer has a bed for you at the camp in Scotts Valley. I said, oh no, I'm not going to go to any camp. I grew up with people that had been in camps. I'm not going to camp. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I'm too old to go to camp. Are you crazy? So he left. Thank God he had the wherewithal to leave our home. That needed to happen. That needed to happen. He needed to get away from me. He needed to save himself. It's hell living with an alcoholic addict. He needed to save himself, and that's exactly what he did, but he wrote it on a piece of paper. This is where I'm going to be. Make this phone call. I will come and get you, and I will bring you to treatment. And I had that piece of paper, and it was on the table, and I was crawling around on the floor looking for anything that got away or drink, anything, and there was nothing, and I didn't know what to do. And as desperate as the dying may be, I picked up the phone and I said, you better come and get me because I don't think I'm going to make it. I felt like I was having a stroke. I weighed 89 pounds when he came and got me. And I simply couldn't do it anymore. I simply couldn't. I just threw up my hands and said, I just can't do this. I didn't say I was done. I just said, I got to do something. I got to go somewhere. I'm not going to make it tonight. And you know, that man came. And he put me in the car, and all the money that I had spent, our whole life savings, everything that I had done, all the bad, all that stuff. He came and he picked me up and he put me in the car, and he loved me, and he embraced me. He nurtured me. We've been married for 38 years. And he took me to Star Lodge Hospital in Scotts Valley. I would not go to the camp. But Star Lodge was owned by Hy Wiesel, the same man that owned the camp. So, I ended up exactly where I was supposed to end up, and we drive up, and there's a sign out front, and it says, "We care." And I thought, now this is really going to be something. They said that at Daytop, too, and look what happened. They care. They don't even know who I am. They don't know what I've done. But what were my options? So he took me in, and the intake nurse was there, and the first thing I said to her was, I can't be here. And she asked me why, and I said, you see, you don't understand something. You don't understand about the hole that I have inside. You don't understand, and my friend Jerry calls it soul sickness, that it's a pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization. And I believe that what they're talking about in the big book is that soul sickness, that deep black hole. I know there are people in this room that have experienced that very, very, very same thing. That's what I had. And I said to her, and I've been trying for years to fill it full of dope and alcohol and all kinds of crazy stuff, and it doesn't get filled. I don't know what to do. And she said, listen, she said, I have been sober in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous for 25 years, and I'm going to tell you that I have filled that hole with the grace of God. That was music to my ears. Nobody had ever, ever said that to me before. I came into Daytop wearing a huge afro. It was big. Big. You see, when I got out of Daytop, I was so angry. I wanted to have a cause. I thought about Angela Davis, and I wanted to be just like her, and I wanted to look like her, so I bought this huge wig. It kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and here I only weighed 89 pounds, and I'm trying to hold this thing up. And I have this huge thing on. It's all lopsided and everything, But I was going to be Angela Davis. See, I was cool. I was Angela Davis without a cause. So I stayed that day because she told me that she filled that hole with the grace of God. That's what I needed to hear that day. That day I stayed. And I remember being in detox, and I could hear them out there. And they were saying, keep coming back. It works. And here I'm in detox, and I'm on all this medication, and I visualize these clowns out there with party hats on. Keep coming back. And then they said the Lord's Prayer. Now, that's all I had to hear. So I called Dan up, and I said, you got to come get me. I'm going crazy. These clowns are saying, keep coming back, it works. And I heard the Lord's Prayer, and where the hell was God? Where the hell was God when I was in New York and I didn't have anywhere to go with my kid? Huh? Where the hell was God when my son lay down in the snow? Where was he then? And I was angry. I was so angry. I needed to get out of there. And he wouldn't come and get me. And every day I would call him, and he wouldn't come to get me. And he said, no, stay. Make up a God. It's God as you understand him. See, he was already going to Alcoholics Anonymous, and they were already doing a job on his head. you see. They were already filling his head with all this spirituality crap, you see. And now I'm supposed to make up a God, and I thought that was kind of hokey. That was kind of stupid. I mean, what do you mean make? I didn't even know how to, what are you talking about? And he started coming to the family group. And I believe in family group, when they confronted him about his drinking and using, that he took a first step and he admitted that he was powerless over alcohol and drugs and his life had become unmanageable. I honestly believe that. And he came to me in detox and he says, we're going to journey together. I had a better plan. I had a much better plan, a plan that I knew would work. See, I was going to gain weight in treatment. I gained like 20, 30 pounds. I was going to be nice looking again, and I was going to go home. We'd fool around a little bit and whatnot, and I would convince him to get loaded because he was my using partner, my drinking partner, my soulmate. Let alone did he betray me and put me in this shithole of a place. Now, he's going to AA and everything is going okay for him, but what about me? Where's mine? You know? And my plan, and I thought that was a good plan. I was gonna pull that off. That's exactly what I was gonna do. And I remember being in detox, and I walked around a little bit, and there was this old woman in this bed, and she was alcoholic. She was late stage alcoholism. I believe she had neuropathy, and her hair was all matted. And I got up from my bed, and I went into her room, and she never had visitors, and there was a brush on the side of her bed, and I comb the mats out of her hair. And I hadn't done anything for anybody for a very, very long time. And what I know today, ladies and gentlemen, is that's the love one alcoholic has for another. That was one alcoholic helping another. I didn't know it at the time. Something was starting to, I don't know, I can't explain it. Something was going on that I couldn't understand. It was scary. And so I went home. My plan was to get loaded. And the big book was on the table, and I hadn't read it. It was dusty. The 12 by 12 was there. Daily meditations. Can you believe they wanted me to meditate? You got to be kidding me. There was a Living Sober book. Everything was dusty, and I wanted to call my dealer. She only lived 5 doors down, and I just opened it up. There are no coincidences. And I opened it up to Keys of the Kingdom, to the last page of Keys of the Kingdom. And in that, she wrote that the last 15 years of her life were meaningful, that she had a wealth of friends, and that ache was gone and need never return, and that in return for a bottle and a hangover, she'd been given the keys to the kingdom. I read that. And I went and I found Dan, and I didn't know what to think, and I was crying. And I said, this woman, I read about the last 15 years of her life. I read it in this book, and she has a wealth of friends, and she found the keys to the kingdom. And I didn't know what that meant, but it sounded pretty good. It sounded pretty damn good, the keys to the kingdom. And I cried out. And I didn't know who I cried out to, but I know today I cried out to the divine. Give me another chance. If I had another chance, please, give me another chance. If I have another chance, I will live my life with dignity and grace. If I have another chance, maybe my kids would start coming around. See, they stopped coming around. They didn't want to see what was happening. Maybe if I had another chance, I could help somebody along the way. Maybe if I had another chance, I could be happy. I didn't even know what the hell that meant. And I started going to meetings with Dan. And I couldn't drive yet. I was still kind of sick. But I occupied a chair in AA. I went to NA, went to all of the 12-step programs. Jesus, I even went to Al-Anon. Can you believe that? And I occupied a seat, and I didn't know what they were talking about, but I did hear that I needed to find a sponsor, and I said, that I will not do. That I will not do, because then I will have to tell this lady everything that I did, and she wouldn't like me, and I'm embarrassed. I can't tell people that I killed my son. I can't tell another woman that I gave my patients water, that I have a history of incarceration. I sponsored a woman one time who told me that she'd never been to prison, and I said to her, I beg to differ with you. If you're an alcoholic or an addict, you've been in the worst kind of prison. You've been in a horrible prison. See, because whenever I got locked up, I always knew when I was going to get out. It isn't that way with drug addiction. You never know when you're going to get out. We just never know. But I did hear you have to change everything. And I said, okay, I could do that. I could change everything without getting a sponsor. So I took off this huge thing, this huge wig, and I shaved my head. Shiny, shiny shave with a buzzer thing. And I got some piercings. And Jerry remembers because he was working at Star Lodge at the time. And I started wearing boots and flowers and crazy stuff. And I wanted to be noticed. I wanted people to see that I was there. I wanted attention, and I was doing all these. I was changing everything on the outside. See, I'm good at changing stuff on the outside. I can do that real easy. But it doesn't fix what's broken in here. No matter what I change on the outside, no matter what it is materially, it does not fix the hole in here. Why? Because recovery is an inside job. That's what recovery is. It's an inside job. That's where the spirit is. That's where the light is. That's the journey in here. And so I was walking around, and I still had all this stuff, all this guilt and all this shame and all this anger and all this stuff, and nothing was changing, and I finally surrendered. And I said, okay, I'm going to need to get a sponsor because I don't think I'm going to stay sober this way. I said, I'd rather get loaded than walk around feeling like this. So I got a sponsor that would help me, that would walk through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous with me, and she said, the way you look, you really need to do something about that. And, at first I took offense to that, like, how dare she, But then I realized what my motives were for doing that, and I knew that I had to do something about that. So my appearance slowly started to change. I slowly started to feel better about myself. I was taking showers. See, I hadn't done that when I was using. I don't know about anybody else, but when I use, I don't do those kinds of things. And we started journeying through the 12 steps. And what I know, and I always say this, is that we have all the power that we need. We've always had it. The power has always been with us. Even when I was on that subway, even when I was sleeping, God knows where, with this child, that power was always with me. We have all the power that we need right now, always have. And every journey begins with the first step. And I was trying to find something in that first step where my life wasn't unmanageable. I really wanted to find at least one thing that I could have and keep and say, see, this is not unmanageable, this part here. But every single part of my life had become unmanageable. Every single part. But by far the worst was the spiritual bankruptcy. See, I'm smart, I can get stuff back. I can get another home. I've lost homes. I can get another home. I could put money back in the bank. I could look good, I could do all that. But that other stuff, that spiritual bankruptcy, no, that was the worst kind of unmanageability. Because I am disconnected from the source. I'm disconnected from God. That's what happens with the spiritual bankruptcy. I'm no longer connected to God. See, I didn't know what that was. It took me a long time to figure that out. And I wanted what you had. And I wanted to believe. I wanted to believe that it would work for me. So I crossed over the threshold of that prison. That prison where alcoholism is like being in prison with the door open. I crossed over the threshold and I came to believe that it would work for me. And I did it because I watched you. And I listened to your stories. I listened to what you said. I listened especially to the women in the program, women who had lost their children and gotten their children back, women that suffered from low self-esteem, that begin to care about themselves. people that had a relationship with the divine. I listened to you, and I came to believe that it would work for me. I came to believe that it would work for me, and I thought about my dad, and I thought about how I could never, ever be close to him. And my God became Father God. Why? Because my God, the divine, has all of the qualities that a nurturing father has. Because my father, poor man, poor alcoholic, could not be there for me. So my God is Father God. They said, make up a God. That's who he is. And I don't know what Father God looks like, but it's a nurturing, deep feeling that is very, very difficult for me to explain. And I reached out and I said, please relieve me of the bondage of self and guide me to the light. Guide me to the light. And I made a decision to work the rest of the steps. And, we know what a fourth step looks like. If you've done them, you know what they're like. They have these forms now, and they have workbooks. I didn't use any of that. I did it the way it said in the big book. I put pen to paper, and I wrote it all down. But this is important. This part I really need to tell you guys. The women that I sponsor, what I say to them is that when you do that fourth step, you better write about the good. I want to see affirmations on there. And these women look at me like I'm crazy and say, I don't have anything that's good. I said, then you're not going to make it. You see, we dwell on the negative. I think if we're always doing this amazing inventory work and we're always dwelling on the negative and the resentments and the fear and all that, I think people have a difficult time staying sober. What about the other stuff? We're good people. We are good people, and we need to find the good. I don't know about anybody in this room, but for years I heard that I was bad, and I bought into it. But we are wonderful, wonderful people. That's who we are, wonderful people. And so I wrote about that, and I found some stuff, that I was teachable, and that I was willing, and I was being honest, and I was a good mother. And by now I'm starting to have grandchildren, so I'm a good grandma. And I started writing about all of this, every single bit of it, And then she said, yes, now we can move on. Now we can move on. And I knew that I could no more remove my character defects than I could stop drinking on my own. So I admitted I was powerless over these spiritual instincts that were keeping me spiritually sick. And I came to believe that God could do for me what I could not do for myself, and I asked God to take all of me, good and bad. That's the way I did 6 and 7, very, very simple. I have a very simple program. And on my list of people that I had heard, there were people on that list that hurt me too, darn it. There were people on that list that got me locked up. There were people on that list that did bad things to me. You see, and what I expected was an amends in return, darn it. But that's not what this is about, is it? That's not what this is about. So I wasn't willing, until I let go of any expectation. None of that stuff matters, what anybody did to me, what he did, what she did, what they said. None of that matters. What matters is that I get right with the universe. That I get right with the divine, that I get right with the source, that I keep my side of the street clean. That's it, that's all. I mean, it would be nice if people came and said, I'm sorry. I mean, who wouldn't want that? But that's not what this is about. No expectations that anybody owed me a darn thing. So when I was willing, I went out there to make amends, and the first amends I made was to a gentleman that I did really, really bad things to, my neighbor. And I was, I knew I had to go to him first, and there was some fear there. He was a big man, and we had both gotten locked up. And I went to him, and I told him exactly what I had done, because I think that amends means change. I know I'm sorry, that's nice. But amendment means I'm going to change my behavior, and I sincerely want you to be a part of that. That's what it means to me. And I told him what I did, and he started to cry. And he said that he'd waited 20 years for me to come to him to have that conversation, and I knew that I could go to every single person after that to make things right. And the people that I can't find, I'm a woman who's in service all the time. That's what I do. I am in service. Service is a very, very important part of my recovery. I've been in service from day one, doing little things here and there, always wanting to be in service. I want to be in service outside of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I am with other friends of Bill W. We go out into the community and do other things because there are a lot of people that do need a lot of help, you see. And my job is to keep my side of the street clean, and the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. So I don't have to like a situation, but I have to like myself in it. And if there's a situation going on and I don't like myself in it, and very often that happens, my job is to get humble and to get right with that. And prayer and meditation is a petition to God. I pray that God make me a channel of love, a channel of forgiveness, a channel of compassion, a channel of tolerance. And I don't think that there's anything more about being in the moment than meditation. That's what meditation is. It's the moment. That's it. And so when I close my eyes, it's that aloneness with the God of my understanding. That's me and the God of my understanding in the moment. And so I can take that experience with me wherever I go and hopefully have a quiet mind and conscious contact. I talk to God, the divine, the Father God that I understand throughout the day. And having had a spiritual awakening as the result of all 12 steps, I think a spiritual awakening is a new state of consciousness. Yeah? It's a whole psychic change, a personality change. My friend Tracy pointed it out to me the other day. She's very wise. It's a whole new transformation. That's what a spiritual awakening is, as a result of all 12 steps. And carrying the message, I think that I have a responsibility to carry the message, and I am responsible. And when anywhere reaches out for help, I want the hand of AA to be there, or NA, whatever the 12th step is. I hope it's my hand, and I hope it's your hand too. And while we're on the subject, I also want you to know that I am outspoken at meeting level. I think that we should be talking about the solution in meetings. I think that we should be talking about the problems with substance abuse and recovery thereof. I go to meetings when they're just talking stuff that is not about recovery. They're not talking solution. I see a newcomer in the back of the room, and I'm thinking, what is he or she going to leave with? And somebody gets up and talks about how they're angry because they burned their dinner. What does that have to do with anything? Problems with substance abuse, with alcohol and drugs and recovery, there are the 12 steps. That's the program of recovery, I believe. I think that that's what we need to be talking about. So I will go home, I will go back to my home group when I have to and say that at meeting level. I'm okay with doing that. And practicing these principles in all my affairs is just that. The principles are in the 12 steps. I want to be available. There's somebody in this room today who had to go to court because her son was being sentenced to 48 years, 46 years, Gabriel. And she asked me to go. And to be honest with you, I was kind of a little bit put off by that at first. I thought, well, geez, I have to go back to that court. I was shackled in that room. My kids came to see me in that same courtroom. Why do I have to go? And then I remembered that I was being selfish, that somebody needed me to go, to just be there with her and her family. You see, and I was able to get up, get dressed, get in my car, and go and sit in that very same courtroom and have him taken away, and a mother's heart was broken, and I know that one. But you see, I got to be available. I got to be available. I wasn't sitting home watching TV. I got to be available. I get to be available to go to InVision with Friends of Bill W. and help feed the homeless twice a month. I get to do that. I get to do that with Bill Fritz and other people in this room. And every time I go to Envision, I look at there and I go, there, but for the grace of God, go I. There are people in need. When my grandchildren come to visit, we go down, we pack sandwiches, we go down to Santa Cruz and we give them out to the homeless. St. James Park with sleeping bags. People need. And I have been given an amazing gift, and I believe that if I say that I'm grateful, then I need to do something with that gratitude. Because if I say that I'm grateful, and I always do, and I don't do anything with that gratitude, gratitude is an action word, then I feel like I'm being selfish. I'm not telling anybody in this room how to do their recovery. I'm not. I'm just simply telling you how I do mine. I have been given another chance. I've been given a second chance at life. I have been given a gift of life where I could live again in peace and dignity. That when I leave this world, that hopefully I can make just a mustard seed of difference for somebody else. You see, that's the gift that I have been given. So my responsibility, my job, when called upon, if at all possible, is to go and help wherever I can. And I love being in service in any capacity in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And when I had a few years of recovery, I went back to school. I was afraid. I wanted to sit in the back of the room at UC Santa Cruz. I was scared. I wanted to work with alcoholics and addicts. I wanted to do that, and I was able to do that, and I took the whole fellowship of AA with me when I did that. The God of my understanding was there in the car, and I did that, and I went, and then I got my KDAC, and I worked at a facility for a number of years as head counselor, and I worked with this lovely woman as my clinical supervisor. And some of those people were coming out of prison. And I worked with some women, and there's a gentleman here who had spent years in prison, and I got to see this gentleman rise from the ashes of substance abuse and incarceration and go on to work at a treatment facility himself. He calls me Mom. He calls me Mom. So you see, I have been extraordinarily blessed. I have been blessed beyond anything that I could ever imagine. Some of these women, they would come to me and they would say, see, now you don't understand how I feel. I lost my kids, they would say. I lost my kids to the system. And I would say, yeah, but you see, you don't understand. I do know how that feels. I know very, very well how that feels. And so the only thing that I could offer them, the only thing that I could do is to offer them my story, to give them my story, and to tell them what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. So I have been blessed with a new way of life, a design for living. That's what the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous are about. They are a design to living. It's a spiritual journey home. Home, here, right here, home. Because I think that this is where the power, the power resides, right here. And so, in closing, what I want to say is that I was like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. And all I ever wanted to do was to get back home. But in order to do that, I had to come to believe that it was possible. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this recording. If you are interested in other speaker